Hello everybody. Welcome to Ask a P of Anything. My name is Greg Prickrell, and the question I would like to address today is one that I get really often. At a certain level it surprises me, it might surprise you as well, but let's dig in. The question is, how can I get my management interested in Agile? So if you look at the statistics, we'll see some details a little bit later. Most organizations today claim that they are doing Agile. But there are still organizations who are using more traditional methods. People at the development level, maybe at the operational level, are aware of Agile or aware of Scrum. They would like to try it. They think it could help them develop better products, but they're not sure how they can convince management that that's the way to go. So to understand Agile, we have to go back to February of 2001 when the Agile Manifesto was written. So a bunch of very smart people got together. They were very frustrated with the way that software was being developed, and they wrote out basically what I consider a philosophy, how they wanted things to change. For example, they said individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. You can read it for yourself. I think it makes sense. It makes a lot more sense if you've done software development in a more traditional way. They made it very clear that it's not like the things on the right aren't important, but when there's a tie, the things on the left win. Those things are more important. And that if we follow these things, we should be able to develop better software. I hear Agile used incorrectly quite a bit. As I said, I consider it a philosophy, some guiding principles, and from that certain frameworks and even methodologies have evolved that help people operationally write and build software. For example, Scrum is the one that's best known. Very heavy adoption. I've helped roll Scrum out several times, have used it successfully. I'm a big fan. Maybe newer in the software world is Kanban. That comes from the world of manufacturing and has to do with how I track work and how I minimize the amount of work that I'm doing at any time. But you should keep in mind that Agile is this philosophy, and from that there are several frameworks. Probably, or based on the data, the most popular of which is Scrum. So here's some data. Version 1 does a survey every year, and you can see by far vast majority of organizations say that they're doing Agile, doing Scrum, and most of them have been doing it at least 3 years. So what's the big difference? What's the big deal about Scrum, for example? Well, it helps to compare it with the way we developed software when I started my career. You can see from this gray hair, I've been doing this a while, and what we would do is somebody would decide what we wanted to build. We would specify the whole thing, and that's kind of functional specification, technical specification. We would actually build the software for months and months. There would be a phase where we would bring it together, test it, try to get it to work together, and then we would release it. And I can assure you it was a nightmare. We would have stacks and stacks of these big specifications. They were wrong because as we were developing, things would change, we would learn things, but we were stuck to doing what was specified. When it came time to integrate things, to test things, nothing worked because these things had been developed in silos independently this whole time, and now trying to get them to fit together, total disaster, I can tell you. That's where a lot of this gray hair comes from. Scrum takes a different approach. Based on Agile, the things that you read in the Agile Manifesto, it says let's do short cycles. Let's work for a couple of weeks or for 3 weeks on this set of things. We'll look at the end to see if they work. If we learn something, we have time to adapt so that the next thing we go to, it's called a sprint, these 2-3 week time-bound development cycles, we can adapt, we can learn, we can fix things. And it turns out that these approaches are based on really completely different philosophies. So if we look at the key difference in my mind between this old way of doing things and the way that we've been doing them maybe the last 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more really, if we think about Scrum being adopted mainstream, is that Waterfall is based on the assumption that we know everything, that things are very predictable, we know exactly what we want to build, we can specify it now because nobody likes to talk about it, but that's more efficient. To do everything at once, to specify it once, on paper it should be more efficient. In practice, in software, what we've learned is that it's not more efficient. It's not more effective because software development, its basic nature is that it's unpredictable. We learn things, requirements change as we go along. So rather than having a system that's based on this idea that things are predictable, we needed a software development framework or methodology that acknowledged that they're not. So instead of going through all stages in the cycle one time, we go through them several times. That's the key difference. The point of this video isn't really to give you a detailed overview of Scrum, but I think that's the key takeaway. Because what we want to talk about later is how can I convince my management that Agile and maybe Scrum are things that we should try. And first, let's think about what happens when agility is lacking. First of all, the end product doesn't necessarily make stakeholders happy. Releases tend to drag on. They get really late because we find out very late in the cycle that these pieces won't come together, that things won't work. One of the benefits of Scrum is that at each checkpoint, we should have a completed product that we could release if we wanted to. Theoretically, that's the theory. And the idea is that if we get behind, we learn it much earlier. We know about it much earlier, and that has certainly been my experience from when I started my career. We all reported green traffic lights all the time until the last few months of the development project, and then all of a sudden everything went red when we finally got honest with ourselves and we knew that this thing wasn't going to come together. Sometimes developers really feel like they're on a treadmill. They go a long time developing without much feedback, and when capacity is lost to rework, we have to fix the things that are there. It has ripple effects throughout the organization. So our project is late, which throws off sales, which throws off marketing, throws off support. So those are some of the things that happen when there's not agility. What are the key benefits of Agile? That's important. And here we start thinking about how you can make the case with management. We should be able to deliver faster. We should have better stakeholder satisfaction. The morale of the team should go way up because they will be much more involved. So if those are the benefits, we can also think about overall what are the key risks if I adopt this thing. And one of the risks that you have to manage, and I guess it's a risk, but it's almost a reality, and that is when you adopt something new, at first things are going to be a little slower. Development will slow down as you learn how to do Agile. You should not expect that you're going to change completely the way that you develop software and all of a sudden, from one day to the next, you're going to be much faster. Like anything else that's non-trivial, it takes a while to learn. There can be problems with morale if you don't really stick to it. If there are early failures and there isn't leadership there to say, hey guys, we're learning, this is going to take us a while to get good. And one of the big risks is that if you don't know where you're going, if you don't really have a strategic approach to the product that you're building, you move forward and go to the wrong place faster. So this is a quote that I came up with during one of the courses that I teach, and that is, speed is a disadvantage when you're headed in the wrong direction. So going faster isn't always good if you don't really know where you want to end up. So the question is, how can I build a case? How can I go to management? What are the KPIs I can show them that demonstrate clearly that Agile is superior to Waterfall? And here, I don't think I have a very satisfactory answer for you. My guess is you're not going to like it. I say that because I'm not satisfied with my answer. And that is, I think it's very difficult to build a traditional business case for Agile and Scrum. Why is that? First of all, most organizations don't really have a baseline. If we're going to look at something like productivity or speed, most organizations can't really measure in any objective way what they're building, how much they're building, and how long it takes them to develop it, how productive each of their developers are. So if you don't have a baseline, how can you compare it to something new? This also is a function somewhat of just software development and the way it works. So when we're doing software development, we're building something new, by definition, that we haven't done before. And I personally have never seen somebody build a non-trivial piece of software in two ways. Okay, let's do one Waterfall, one Agile, and see who finishes faster, or see who creates the better product. It just doesn't happen. It's really a fundamentally different way of developing, and I think you have to try it. Part of Scrum is measuring how quickly you do things. It is a fact-based approach, but without a baseline to compare it to, it's going to be questionable. And I think in the best of cases, when you collect data, it's very, very difficult to make this clear financial case. So where does that leave us? It leaves you going to management and showing them some data, showing them how many organizations are actually doing it, convincing them that, hey, if we do it too, we can learn from these other organizations, and then showing them the difference between these two. And so much of it comes down to that basic principle that Waterfall is based on this idea that we know everything we want to build, and Scrum acknowledges, Agile acknowledges that we don't know. So we need to optimize for agility, the ability to adapt, learn, change what we do. Wish I had a better answer for you there, but that is reality. But there's some good news. You can test drive Agile. You don't have to change your entire organization, and you probably shouldn't anyway. So this isn't the kind of thing where you flip a switch and from one day to the next, your entire development organization changes to Agile. There are a couple of ways that you can try it incrementally. If you're a big shop, you might have one team working on a new feature set. Even better, maybe an entirely new product. You should get some help setting it up. You should do your homework. You should do the preparation. But you can test it with a small team for a while. And as they learn best practices, it has to be adapted. You know, Scrum is what they call a framework. So it leaves plenty of room for interpretation. This team can figure out how it works out in your organization and then share their best practices with others. Another thing you can do is try to adopt at least some elements of it. Scrum has this idea of a backlog, a way of managing requirements. Look into that and see if you can use that for some prioritization. See if you can explore the roles that are part of Scrum, product owner, Scrum master, people who look at the process, and see what elements of Scrum you can pull out that will make you more efficient. I personally like the approach of taking something new, taking a team and saying, this team is going to try Agile, and if it works, we will spread it throughout the organization. I think that is the approach that I've seen get the most traction with management. Don't go to them and say, let's take everything that's critical and change the way we develop. That could be very threatening. Say, look, I want to take one team. This team, for whatever reason, is a little more decoupled from the other teams. There aren't as many dependencies. And since everybody is doing Agile, and since it's optimized for an environment that changes, and of course our environment changes, let's give it a shot. With that, I would say that it's very important to get some help. The first time through it, it's very difficult to just read some books or maybe take a class and get it to work. Not saying it's impossible, but I would really try to convince them in investing in somebody who has expertise. Maybe you can hire somebody with that expertise who can become part of the team. Maybe you hire somebody who can just act as a coach as you're rolling it out, really help get it ingrained, and from then on it's just continuous improvement. Where can you find more information? You know, the internet is saturated with information about Agile and Scrum. Go out, take a look. I would say the definitive guide is at scrumguide.org, but you can search on Amazon for books. There are all kinds of events you can go to talk to people, and that's something that I didn't mention. What I would try to do if I were trying to convince management that they should adopt Agile is I would try to find an organization somewhat like mine and connect management. Let them talk to each other about their experiences. Nothing is more convincing than hearing that somebody else like you tried it and got benefit from it. And there are blogs all over the place. Do a Google and you can spend weeks just reading what's out there about Scrum. This is me online. You can see more about me. I do product management consulting and training, including Agile and Lean. I have a blog where I talk about these topics quite a bit. I have a site called SPM Resources where you can go just to get information about software product management in general, and I tweet like crazy. So thanks for your time. I hope this helped.